social science-oriented topic on water sustainability from consumer awareness to behavioral change support. We have the pleasure here to have a very interesting panel of speakers trying to find synergies and solutions to support water management and sustainability connected to behavioral change of consumers. So just a few notes in the beginning. The session will be entirely recorded and will be published on the NAIADES channels later on. So you will be able to find the video on NAIADES YouTube channel. We would kindly ask you to please mute your microphones if you are not speaking, but please feel free to post your questions in the chat. And also to share your experiences and to tweet about NAIADES and your experiences on @NAIADES project in the Twitter account using hashtag NAIADES webinars. We are very happy to interact with you on social media as well. So this is the agenda for today. There will be 6, I believe, very interesting and very informative sessions today. So we are, of course, very happy to have all the speakers here, to have you all here. And at the end of these 6 presentations, there will be a panel session and we will have time for your questions. So please post them in the chat. So I'm Anja Polajnar. I'm a project manager. I work at Jožef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana, Slovenia. My background is international relations and social science, so I'm really glad to be here today. I'm very interested in this webinar. Otherwise, I work in several European projects and UNESCO projects on open education and sustainable development goals. So the first presentation will be done by Esther González Amorós. She's 23 years old. She's studying the Masters in Industrial Engineering, and she's doing internship in Aguas de Alicante in Research and Development Department. And Dr. Evangelia Anagnostopoulou, she's a researcher at the Institute of Communication and Computer Systems. Her research interests include recommendation, persuasion, and personalization systems. She holds a doctoral degree in behavioral change support systems from the National Technical University of Athens in Greece. She graduated in 2012 from the Department of Informatics and Telecommunications of National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She also received a master's degree in medical informatics from the same university. She worked as complaint and troubleshooting manager at Vodafone and as a software engineer at the chemical engineering department at NTUA. She has published more than 12 papers in international peer-reviewed journals and conferences. So the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. As Anja said, I'm Esther González, and I am in an internship in Aguas de Alicante. I'm glad to be here talking to you and introducing the topic of awareness dashboard and application in Alicante schools. To put you in context, Alicante is a Mediterranean coastal city in the southeast of Spain, and the population of city is around 335,000 inhabitants, but in summer it reaches 500,000 inhabitants. Our company manages all the urban water cycle: the drinking water production and supply, the wastewater collection and treatment, the recycled water treatment and supply. Alicante is subject to extreme weather events. We have long drought periods and from time to time torrential rains and fast flood episodes. These extreme weather events are increasingly frequently according to the projections of climate change. It has no local water resources, and for this reason, there is a high relevance of water use for sustainability of water resources. Finally, we have sensitive coastal waters. Background and education campaigns. Aqualogia. It's an educational program designed for children with the aim of developing and gaining skills about water cycle consumption. There are the main objectives: bringing the knowledge of natural and urban water cycles closer to school children, raise awareness about the climate crisis and promote collective actions to face it, facilitate the participation and interaction of school children through the use of new technologies, make available to the educational community a didactic tool adapted to the curriculum of each educational cycle. Before COVID, the professional workers of Aqualogia used to go to each school that participate in program, but now it has been created a digital platform which educational influencers and students would find different resources at this digital platform. Now, I would introduce you briefly the education campaigns that we are carrying out in our company. These are some contests that Aguas de Alicante has been performing. Water and energy are the clue of life, a contest of murals destined to school children such as preschool and primary. Young scientists. It is destined to secondary and bachelorship students. We can find in this table the school children that participate in Aqualogia in 2019. We are talking about 3,500 students. And if we talk in general terms, we have had around 50,000 participants. Regarding to the museum, we had 17,500 visitors in that year. But in general terms, we have had 150,000 visitors. Installations to visit. Aguas de Alicante Museum. Inside our company, Aguas de Alicante has created a museum dedicated to water knowledge. On the ground floor, we can find contests about settlements and cultures reveal the evolution of water techniques and uses and water catchment and distribution methods. Discover the history of Alicante's water supply contract. Floor 1, have fun with water. This is a totally educational area that is intuitive and interactive. Games and new technologies illustrate the states of water, how water reaches our homes, and the complete water cycle. In addition, there is a cinema room for projecting material relating to the water resource. Floor 2, projects and sustainable development. There are 2 rooms on this floor. In the first, find out about Aguas de Alicante's main project and works in recent years. In the second room, discover Aguas de Alicante's actions to achieve sustainable development. And the wells of Argos. They were designed to collect and store rainwater for subsequent distribution. Also, on the floor 2, a section for NAIADES project will be set up soon. Why are we focusing in schools? One of the main objectives for Aguas de Alicante is the water awareness consumption of the society, in particular the children's. For this reason, we have created water watchers, a contest for children who will think about different ideas to reduce water consumption in their school. This is the poster created for the school campaign, and it says that your school is full of water watchers. Help us to find them. The contest rules. The schools must take into account that they will complete a pre-registration by Microsoft Forms. There will be two categories of participation. One of these categories is safe water. In this category, students will demonstrate real actions to reduce the water consumption of their school. On the other category, the future of water, teams will imagine how they could make a more efficient use of water in their schools. The school teams will be from 6 to 8 students and 1 teacher. The age range of the teams will be between 10 and 12 years old for primary schools and between 12 and 14 years old for secondary schools. The prizes that they will obtain will be an electronic educational pack for primary schools and 3D printer for secondary schools, and a gift share for each participant. The way to evaluate the project will be by a poster and a short video for primary students, and a short report and short video for secondary students. The contest jury will be formed by one person from Aguas de Alicante, one person from the City Council of Alicante, and one person from NAIADES. Finally, the schools have to take into account different dates, such as the pre-registration date, the date to send the report, and the winner's announcement date. Information gathered from each school. Through the meter ID parameter, we could control the water consumption in each school. This meter ID is related to other parameters, such as service point and connection ID. It works as a reference point for the company, address and GPS coordinates. Here we focus on where the meter ID is located. The description, it refers to the center's name. Activity type, the class of school, it is private, public, primary school, high school. Number of users, quantity of pupils, teacher, and school workers. And historical data, the first meter ID date. Regarding launch campaign for promoting water watchers, Aguas de Alicante has made several types of publicity. Social networks, we have used social networks to promote this contest, like Twitter and LinkedIn, in where we post the data. Mailing, we also send an email to every school to participate in it. And press release. Last of all, we contacted with some newspaper for our project to be announced in the media in local terms. So this is all from my side. Thank you so much, and Evangelia, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we see. Please try presenter mode, full screen slides.
I think those are mine. Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Yeah, can you just put my slide on, if that's possible?
Richard, right now it's Evangelia's turn to present. You're next.
Okay.
Okay, we see the slides.
Yes, you have to enable editing before you can share the full screen.
Yes, I cannot have a full screen at my PowerPoint presentation. I'll present you the Water Consumer Awareness Dashboard. Water utilities need to be able to deploy ICT-supported water consumption awareness programs and engage water consumers in water conservation activities. In order to cover their needs, we have developed a web-based behavioral change support application that nudges students towards water conservation. The application allows users to run behavioral change support campaigns at school, monitor them, and it also supports different persuasive strategies, including self-monitoring, reward, comparison, suggestion, and social norm-based messaging. When students log into the app for the first time, the screen below appears, which provides information regarding the school's consumption compared to other schools in 3 different types of leaderboards, aiming to motivate students to reduce their water consumption. In the main page of the dashboard, on the weekly water consumption tab, a student can see a leaderboard that shows the schools ranked based on their water consumption in the last week. Also, the dashboard provides feedback and comparison-based interventions in order to persuade students to make more sustainable choices. The dashboard shows a graph that compares water consumption of student schools compared to the average water consumption and the water consumption of the best 20% of the schools. Moreover, persuasive message is included, nudging the students to either try more to reduce their consumption or rewarding them for their effort, depending on the school position in the list. In the main screen of the dashboard, on the Consumption Change tab, students can see a leaderboard that shows the schools ranked based on their water consumption change since last week. On the overall consumption change tab, students can see a leaderboard that shows the water consumption change since the start of the pilot. The total water consumption per hour and total water consumption per day of each school is presented in the statistics page. Also, you can see the report page. Teachers and students can export and download consumption reports. In this screen, you can see the community and the school posts pages. The Water Consumption Awareness Dashboard also provides a forum where users can share their posts with other users, either from the same school or from other schools. Note that posts are moderated by the teachers who are responsible to posting the application. Aguas de Alicante collaborate with schools in order to apply the NAIADES approach in primary and secondary schools. aiming at increasing student awareness on water conservation activities at schools and engage them in water conservation activities. Students are a group of consumers that can provide a channel for generating real impact as they will evolve to the responsible citizens of tomorrow. Also, they can transfer the knowledge to their families, leading to a cascading effect of the NAIADES impact. Thank you for your attention.
So, Evangelia and Esther, thank you for this very interesting presentation. And now let's go to the next speaker. So, Richard Elelman. He studied politics in the UK before living in France, Spain, Portugal, the Middle East, Sudan, and India. He is currently head of politics at EURECAT and is the leader of the World Water Quality Alliance social engagement program of the United Nations. The former deputy mayor of Figueres in Spain, he is a political analyst who has in recent years specialized in environmental and scientific policy and the links between politics, the world of research and development, and citizen engagement. He works in collaboration with many supranational organizations such as the Environment Programme, UNESCO, the World Bank, and the Joint Research Center of the European Commission as an external expert. He's currently working on the Vife Nexus in the Mediterranean and the consequences of climate change on migration, conflict, and gender equality. He's a regular speaker at numerous international conferences in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. So, Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Apologies, I've had some real problems connecting because we had a power cut here. So I apologize for that. But it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm going to be talking about, if I can get this, yes, I can. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
But we cannot
Great,
see you. If you could please turn on your camera as well.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Can you please turn on your camera as well, because we cannot see you though.
Oh, you can't see me? Oh, in that case, hang on, let me. Right, now I hope you have the pleasure of seeing me. Yeah?
It's okay now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, so now that you see the slide and you see my face, good morning. And so I'm going to be talking about very quickly the role of the quintuple helix in water sustainability. And I think the first thing that I need to do is to explain to people what the quintuple helix is. From the early 1990s, it became very clear that in order to really provide successful, not only water policy, but environmental policy creation, it's necessary to involve all parts of society. And right at the beginning, investigators such as Cariñanes, they devised a scheme called the triple helix, where they were talking about the collusion and the collaboration between the public sector, the private sector, and the research sector. And they were saying that these sectors aren't successfully talking to each other, that they're not in a dialogue with each other. They are, and they were indeed correct, and they are to a certain extent still correct today. The concept of the triple helix became the quadruple helix when the citizens themselves were added into the equation. And then in recent years as well, it's become the quintuple helix because many researchers and authorities and administrations now realize as well that in order to truly engage citizens, we need to create an emotional response. And so therefore, culture itself is also important. So that's what the quintuple helix is. The reason why it's so important, the reason why it's so important is because in order to truly develop what we are doing, it is necessary to have policy continuity. In order to guarantee policy continuity, you have to guarantee that there is a general social consensus. And to create that, we need the involvement of the citizens. We need the involvement of citizens for two reasons. First of all, to give legitimacy to the co-creation stage of a policy or an initiative or indeed a research project. At the same time, we also need to involve those citizens in the implementation. And there are two ways that we can involve citizens and indeed all members of the Quintuple Helix at a local level in implementation. First of all, we involve them in the co-creation and the implementation side part, but how do we do that? Where does the implementation come in with people who are not qualified technicians or scientists? First of all, they become the observers of the social political side. They become, if we will, the overseers of what has been decided. But then also, as a result of being engaged, as a result of being aware of what is happening, they also become much more effective citizen scientists because they have been engaged before. When we talk about citizen science, all too often what happens is that researchers and projects parachute in to a scenery, into a local community or into a region, and are immediately asked to participate by collecting samples or by observing or by monitoring. However, very often they don't understand the real importance of what they're doing, nor are they involved in any of the other aspects of the project itself or the initiative or the policy. And this is where we have been failing as a society in general, that we haven't been including all of the sectors and creating a dialogue between all of the members of the Quintuple Helix. It's not just me who says that. The OECD, as you can see here, have been saying this. The World Bank have been saying this. The European Commission have been calling for true citizen participation. And if you look at the recent Horizon Europe calls, all of them now are beginning to develop sections where social scientists are called for. And if the United Nations, through its Sustainable Development Goals, have certainly been doing this. And this is work in which we have been involved as well, not only through Fireware for Water as a project, but we've also been involved as well through the United Nations World Water Quality Alliance. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it is absolutely vital that all the sectors of society come together if we are to be effective. So what is engagement? I think I really explained this before. Engagement is not giving a conference and informing people. Engagement is not having a couple of meetings with members of the local community. Engagement is truly involving both the public sector, the private sector, the research sector, the citizens and the cultural sector together in an equal dialogue. When we talk about citizens, we must put special emphasis as well on the inclusion, for example, of gender, of low-income groups who very often are not invited or don't have the accessibility to this type of initiative. We're talking about ethnic minorities as well, who play a very important role within their community. And we're also talking about all age groups. So we're not just talking about going to the schools, which is an excellent example, as was given before. We're not just talking about going to universities or young people, but we're also talking about every age group, right up to the pensioners, very often whose communities can be strongly affected as well by problems regarding water. So engagement is really involving all of them together, giving them a role in the co-creation, but also, as I've said before, giving them a role in implementation. So it becomes their initiative, it becomes their policy. And what we have been doing through the World Water Quality Alliance, we've also been doing this through the project Fireware for Water, is that what we try to do is we try to take the supranational strategy or policy and convert it into a local reality. what we've been doing through the World Water Quality Alliance is creating what we describe as local water forums, which I believe that Ciprian is going to be talking about a little later on as well. But a local water forum is a collection of representatives of all of those sectors, all of the sectors of the Quintuple Helix at a local community level. Because something else that has been seen is that it is at the local community level where we can be most effective. And if you create this system of local communities working towards water, and you bring all of those local communities together, then you have a region. If you bring the regions together, you then have a nation. And if you bring the nations together, then you have, shall we say, a universal approach, in this case, to the question of water quality. And that is the basis of the philosophy that we have been applying under the umbrella of the United Nations Environment Programme. So what we do is that we use three elements that we call the TAP. First of all, we use technology so that all of the actions are based on science, they are based on fact, but they are also, the technology and the science is also fed, as I said before, by the citizens who become involved in water-based issues. We're then talking about art. This is the emotional stimuli which I was describing before, in order to create an awareness amongst people, in order that people themselves can feel emotional about the true causes of the crisis which we have to face, the challenges that we have to face, not just in Africa and South America and Southeast Asia, where we typically think of these crises happening, but here indeed in Europe, here in North America, all around the world. And we have local water forums now established in all of the continents, and we're using art and we're using culture to be able to communicate with these people. And then the P on TAP are practices and policies, so that the technology and the art contributes to far better practices and far more inclusive policies, where all of the aspects of society are not only taken into account, but they are engaged to guarantee the creation of a social consensus, which then leads to political continuity, which is absolutely essential, not only when we're talking about environmental issues such as water, but indeed any social issue which we face today. To show you an example of how this has happened, we've been working on this approach over the last 6 or 7 years. This picture was actually drawn by a Syrian refugee who was living in North Jordan at the time. When they painted this picture, they were 7 years, the person involved was 7 years old. It was a little girl, she was 7 years old. And I think that this is a demonstration, perhaps a stupid demonstration on my side, but that a picture, an image, can be so much more effective than 1,000 words and be very, very influential. And this is a 7-year-old child's view of water, of the conditions on the left in which she lives, and then how she perceives how people live, shall we say, in wealthier nations on the right. And I think it's a diagram which encapsulates very clearly two things. First of all, how the water situation is perceived in communities beyond Europe, but also the power of art itself. And as I say there above, awareness leads to concern, concern leads to engagement, engagement leads to consensus, and consensus leads to continuity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. And now let's move to the next speaker, Dr. Rick Hogeboom. Let me just, okay. So, Dr. Rick Hogeboom is Executive Director at the Water Footprint Network, an international non-profit partner and donor organization based in the Netherlands. With Water Footprint Network, he uses the water footprint footprint concept to promote the transition toward sustainable, fair, and efficient use of the world's freshwater resources. He's also assistant professor, multidisciplinary water management at the University of Twente, the Netherlands, where he explores global water use and its impact on the environment, economics, and society. He actively works with a variety of stakeholders, including consumers, businesses, NGOs, governments, and investors, to develop solutions to the world's pressing water issues. Finally, Rick is a program manager at the Wet Skills Foundation, where he leads and organizes international networking and learning events for future water leaders. So, Rick, the floor is yours.
Yes, that's quite a mouthful. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. Assuming it's morning for most of us. Good to, well, I don't see you, unfortunately. It's just talking to a screen, too bad. But I hope you can at least see and hear me and also see my slides. So we are shifting gears a little bit, but I see definitely some connection to the earlier two speakers. But in this session, I would like to dive into our water footprint. And I can already tell you from the onset that globally we are using too much water, way too much. But how much water do we use and how much water do we actually pollute? How do we measure that? After all, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And what are the implications of that water use for economies, for the environment, for societies, for staying within the planetary boundaries while meeting basic human rights to water? And what can we do in response to our water overuse? These are just some questions that I'll shortly address in the 15 minutes that we have together. And I thought it might be fun to start with a short question basically, because maybe you already know everything and then I'll be talking here for nothing. And that's the title of this presentation. Do you know your water footprint? So maybe it's good to open the chat. I think that's the easiest means. So think for a second, how much water do you use? What is your water footprint per day? Let's make it per day. If you can enter that in the chat, that would be awesome. Let's see how much knowledge we already have in the room. I hope you can access the chat, right? I see some hesitation, no answers coming. Who dares? Yeah, okay. I see some answers coming in. That's good. Direct. Okay, Michael, maybe also some estimates for indirect. I see some precision. Okay. Good. Okay, I see that there are probably, of course, there's some people here who have some idea, but I think I can also add maybe a thing or two on our water footprint. So I won't give you the answer right now. I'll keep you in suspense for a little bit, but we will get to the answer in a bit. I would like to cover 3 short blocks in the 15 minutes that we have. First, to get the definition straight. Quickly explore what is a water footprint, and then I'll get to the meat of the presentation, which is about water footprint assessment and why that is a useful method, and I'll close with a short invitation. So first, what is the water footprint that I just asked you to fill out? The water footprint is a multi-dimensional indicator of water use and pollution. It measures the consumptive part of water use, so it's net use, not abstraction or withdrawal. And it comes in 3 colors. There's a blue, a green, and a gray component to a water footprint, and I'll have a separate slide on that in a bit. It is time and location specific, which means that every estimate for a water footprint has a time and location basis connected to it. And very importantly, it is linked to a human activity, because you really have to think of a water footprint not as some hydrological variable, but as an appropriation variable. How much water do we claim for the various human activities or processes that we want to carry out that happen to cost water or pollute water? Because we define these footprints at the level of activity or process, we can also add them up. A product consists of many steps in order to get to that product, and all those steps may cost water. And the principles behind the water footprint concept state that you have to add the direct and the indirect water to get to aggregate footprints. For instance, at the product level, or for a company, or for a sector, a portfolio, if we are talking investors, but also a more geographical region, like a country or a basin. And interestingly, also of us, of consumers. And that might be the focus of this presentation a bit later. So quickly on those three colors, they refer to the source, where green water is water that evaporates into the atmosphere from rainfall, insofar as it doesn't become runoff. If it does become runoff or percolates to groundwater, then we're talking about blue water. So that's water taken from streams and rivers and groundwater. And gray water footprint is a measure for water pollution. I also mentioned that we have to account for both direct and indirect use if we do that for products. So here we see a schematized example for meat. Suppose I will have a steak for dinner tonight. I'm based in the Netherlands, by the way, so I am the direct consumer in the Netherlands in this case. So there may be some water use. I may have a nice gravy to go with that steak. That won't be a whole lot of water. But the retailer may have needed some water as well, as has the food processor or the farmer, or also for the cultivation of the feed crop that the animals were fed during their lifetime. And it may not come as a surprise that the bulk of the footprint is actually in that last or first stage, depending on how you look at it, in the cultivation of the feed crops. And we have to add the water of all of those steps to get to the water footprint of that piece of steak that I might have for dinner. From the simplified supply chain that you see underneath the schematized steps, you can also see that space connotation that I already referred to a bit earlier. I may consume my steak here in the Netherlands, but the cow may have actually lived in the UK, and the feed that the cow was eating may have been partially imported from Brazil. So the total footprint for that product also has multiple spatial locations and the connotations to those locations connected to it. If we do that whole exercise for different products, and I'm sure you have seen some of the numbers maybe pass by, for a glass of milk, we need roughly 250 liters of water, of which 85% is green, 8% blue, and 7% gray. Chocolate, one of my favorites, but unfortunately very water intensive, 17,000 liters per kilogram to produce. So that's one of the most water intensive products. And maybe if you think about it, why would that have such a high footprint? As you can see from the numbers, the bulk of it is green water, and that has to do with that fact that cocoa is a tropical plant, so evaporative demand is quite high in those regions, and that automatically also boosts the footprint. And because it's in the tropics and not here in the Netherlands, and I don't think in any parts of Europe where we grow this, it also already shows again that spatial connection from a consumer perspective, that part of our footprint will also be abroad. And of course, then that piece of steak, in this instance expressed per kilogram, 15,000 liters per kilo. And just to give you an impression of how much water that is, that's about the equivalent of this construction container. So quite a bit. Okay, but what is new about that, or what is relevant, and what we measure is the net consumption instead of the gross abstraction. That's relevant to keep in mind. We also measure the green water that we use, so the rainwater that is made beneficial for human activities, and there is a component that measures water pollution. So it really is a comprehensive indicator at that. But for water management more broadly, it really broadens the perspectives compared to what traditionally goes on in water management. And particularly it is because it introduces supply chain thinking. It really links the producer to the consumer. And because those trade chains are often internationally interwoven, it adds that international dimension to water use and scarcity. And along with that, we also have multiple players and actors that we need to involve to solve some of the problems that we are running into. Okay, with some of the basics on the footprint out of the way, what is then water footprint assessment? Because that was the invitation, like what is water footprint assessment? How can that be useful? That is the method to assess our footprints in a systematic manner. It is a science-based method, but it also came about in broad consultation with public and corporate partners from practice. So it really balances both on the research and on the practice side. It is laid out in our water footprint assessment manual. You see a screenshot of that here. And the basic premise is actually quite logical. It's made up of 4 sequential steps. First, you need to set goals for your assessment. What questions do you want to have answered if you do a water footprint assessment? Are you interested in the water footprint of a product? Or are you interested in the impact of a footprint in a particular geographical region? What is the scope of your assessment? Do you assess all colors, green, blue, and gray? And what is the time horizon that you're looking at? Or are you backcasting? All important questions you need to figure out before you start. Then in the second phase, we do the actual accounting. That's where the numbers come in. Numbers meaning the water footprints, and they are a great communication tool in and of themselves. They resonate with many people and organizations, and they readily understand water volumes, which explains, I think, a lot of the success of the method. But yeah, it's just the numbers. The numbers can only tell you that much. So you need to contextualize them to be able to answer that so what question. So what if a water footprint is larger for one product than for the other? What does it mean? What are the implications? And here it becomes a bit more complex because unlike CO2 and the carbon footprint, for water, it does matter where you emit or where you cause your water footprint to be, because the impact will be very different from one location to the other. And that is what step 3 is all about, to give that contextualization, to understand the sustainability in the broadest sense of what that footprint means. So you really embed that footprint in an appropriate sustainability context. And finally, if you have measured your footprints and you know how much water you use and pollute, if you know what the impacts are from the sustainability assessment, then it is time to figure out what we are going to do about it. So what components of that footprint do we need to address first? Maybe they are in hotspot areas, maybe one stands out, but how do you prioritize on action? So that would be the 4th step. So I think that makes sense, right? I mean, 4 steps: know what you want, do the accounting, contextualize it, and take action. And let me talk you through a short example. And the goal of that example is that we want to know the water footprint of a consumer, of an average European consumer. After all, this is a European project that we are having this webinar for. The NAIADES project is a European project, and that is, of course, the question that I started with in the beginning. So that is our goal, phase 1, know the water footprint of a consumer. So then we go to phase 2. In order to find the water footprint of a consumer, we have to map all the activities and products that take water that are part of the average lifestyle. And that starts with the water use at home. That's also what I saw in the chat with some of the answers. It's the water for washing, for cooking and cleaning. And I even saw a, correct answer. The European average direct water use is 120 liters per person per day. So 120 liters per person per day for washing, cooking and cleaning. But that is only the direct use. And as I explained in water footprint assessment, we want to include all water along the entire value chain. So that includes the indirect water use that we need to produce the products that we buy, the food that we eat, and also the clothes that we wear. And if we add all that up, we arrive at a whopping 5,000 liters per person per day. And I didn't see anyone close in the chat to that number of 5,000, but 5,000 is really the European average water use per person per day. Now let's zoom in a little bit on those numbers. Most of those 5,000 liters are for food, are used for food to produce our diet. Some of it is also for energy, as you can see in these top graphs. And mind you that these 5,000 liters represent only the green and blue water footprint. The gray pollution component is excluded, as it is notoriously hard to get good data on water quality for these assessments. So the left A figure gives you the green and blue total, and the right top corner gives you blue only, and blue only is 400 liters per person per day. Now, rightly below that, we see an artist impression, referring to the tab, the A of tab of the previous speaker. We have an artist impression of diet only for, in this case, randomly selected Germany and Italy. So what you see in the background is an aquarium filled with the amount of water needed to produce the average diet of a German and an Italian citizen. And if you add that all up, then for a German, it shows that we need roughly 2,900 liters per day, whereas Italians need 4,800 liters per day. Why is it so much higher for Italians? Well, that basically has to do with the fact that Italians really like their meats Their diets have more animal products in them, and these are typically very water intensive. Okay, let's map it and zoom it in even further. Now we do a mix and match of EU countries. I realize that, but this is an example for Dutch consumers. So I'm Dutch, so the Dutch consumers also have their footprint spread out over the globe. And all the yellow spots on this map indicate locations where water is used to produce for the Dutch. Yeah. So we take our strawberries from Spain, our cotton from Central Asia, soy for the livestock sector from Brazil. It almost looks like a COVID intensity map. That's not it. It's really the water footprint map that we're looking at. And if we do all that adding up, we see that even 95% of that Dutch footprint lies outside of our own country borders. So we really depend on external resources, on foreign water resources, but we can make use of them through international trade. Such a map would typically then conclude the accounting phase, right? We have now mapped the water footprint of all activities and products that an average EU consumer, or in this case, a Dutch consumer, consumes. And in the case of the Dutch, that adds up to 4,000 liters per day, slightly short of the average 5,000 for the EU. Okay, we shift now to the third step of footprint assessment, and that is the sustainability assessment. What is the context here? The context, and for the sake of time, I have to keep it short. I will only focus on environmental sustainability. Water scarcity is an enormous issue in many places around the world, and all red areas that you see on this map indicate where humans collectively are using more water than we have sustainably available. So we use more than there is, and that comes at the cost of ecosystems, or we draw it from unrenewable or fossil groundwater resources. So we know that these are places where we are not in a environmentally sustainable situation. So we want to know if our footprints that we found in the accounting are actually located in such red areas, or maybe even more importantly, if to what extent they are contributing to the fact that these locations color red, right? That they are the culprits of that scarcity. So the result is shown in this map. This is an overlay of that Dutch consumption again with that scarcity map that I just showed. And basically what it shows is that every red and yellow cell is a location where production takes place for the Dutch consumer that is actually unsustainable. And mind you, this is blue water only, so green and gray are excluded here. And if we do that assessment, we find that almost half, 43% of our blue water footprint is unsustainable. It comes at the cost of nature, really, and we cannot sustain it. It drives on fossil sources or at the cost of nature. But we can also see that it concentrates in a number of places, and in our case, the bulk of that unsustainable part is located in just a few countries. And because in the accounting we know where the products are produced that we consume, we know that it has to do with rice and soybean production in the US, or with olives from Spain, or sugar beets from the Nile Basin, and nuts from Iran. And the highest red on this map is actually Pakistan, most specifically the Indus Basin. And we source a lot of sugarcane and rice from that. Now, just to make that maybe a little bit more visual, if we zoom into that particular place, then this is how a red dot on that unsustainability map might look like. It's a river flowing with plastic instead of with water because it has been fully drained. And that again raises some issues for the highly endangered Indus River Basin dolphin, which you can see here before and after. It's not just overconsumption, right? Although, fish typically prefer water over dry land to live, but also the pollution side for that sugarcane production are very important factors to the threatening of the habitat for this endangered species. So the sugarcane that we may import to Europe and turn into the sugar, into the cookie that perhaps you just ate, or the sugar that you put in your tea that you just drank, we know what that might look like on the ground. Typically, in a sustainability assessment, we will look more broadly than just environmental impacts of water use. We will also contextualize for economically efficient use. So we look, do you not waste water needlessly? We also look at the fair sharing component between different user groups. And we also look at the, because of this internationally interwoven supply chains that I already referred to, we also look often at the dependencies on foreign water resources. But for the sake of time, I cannot go into that in too much detail. And likewise, I can also not go into much detail about the footprint of energy. So I will only say here that also the energy part really constitutes a substantial share of the water footprint of the average consumer. So we also need to account for the sustainability of that footprint. And for a study that we did for the European Commission recently, we found that the EU is also increasingly dependent for its energy on regions that are affected by water scarcity. So that again has major implications for the energy transition that we need to make to mitigate climate change. Concluding my example of a water footprint assessment for a European consumer, we are at the last stage now of getting to action, the response formulation. What can we do to reduce the footprint or mitigate the negative impacts that we found in the sustainability assessment? And that first would prioritize probably the food component, because that's the largest we know from the accounting. So we would have to change our diets. And this table here shows that shifting from a carnivorous to, for instance, a vegetarian or even a vegan diet can really save a lot of water, up to almost half of our total water footprint. Now, I hear you think, if you consider that previous map, we can also, if we can link to the pixel where a product comes from, then why don't we just stop consuming from those particularly unsustainable red areas? So in this case, just stop importing sugar from polluting Pakistani farmers. Well, that might theoretically be true, and it's a gross simplification because I only explored one dimension, but in practice, it's really not that easy. Just think about it. Yes, we can exchange products in our supermarket basket or in our meal plans and exchange water intensive for more water sustainable alternative, but how do you know to make that choice? If I would now just say, you know, change your diet such that it is more water sustainable, then what would be your first step? Would you know what to do? Now, you cannot tell if potatoes from the supermarket are grown in a water sustainable way or not. And also, as I already touched on, there's so much local context that you need to take into account to determine whether or not a product is water sustainable. But we really need and lack that transparency right now from businesses, from producers on their water use, on their impacts. So perhaps we need a label for that. That might be at least something that businesses and producers can pick up themselves. On the other hand, maybe governments should also take a role here to enforce that transparency. Or even we as consumers can become a little bit more activistic and ask our favorite brands or our producers to share such information so that in the end we can actually make that informed decision. And we cannot make that decision now. Okay. This brings me to the last block or slide better with my invitation. I hope to have given you a glance into what a water footprint is and what water footprint assessment as a method may look like. I think as a method it is a much needed tool for companies and governments to help understand their water use and pollution, but we can also apply it to consumers. We have written it all out in a manual that really helps to ensure that we are also talking the same language, that we are talking about the same thing when we use the term water footprint. And it guides people, companies towards bringing the necessary transparency, for instance, through disclosures, through labeling, through certification. And it really provides that science-based, scientific basis for setting targets, meaningful targets to reduce water use, or at least the unsustainable part of that footprint. Not just in a company's direct operations, but also across fence lines in global, international value chains. And finally, because the aim of the Water Footprint Network is to promote fair and smart use of the world's freshwater resources, I will continue to raise awareness also for this important issue in research, as well as through corporate and through public action. So my invitation, and I want to conclude on that, is to work with us. That can either be on a bilateral basis or engaging with us through Horizon Europe projects, and it can be either through my university affiliation or the capacity with the Water Footprint Network. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I think questions are reserved until the end, so we'll have to wait with that. Thank you.
So, Rick, thank you for this very informative and very interesting presentation.
My pleasure.
Now, let's move to our next speaker, Stefan Pouffary. He works in the field of international cooperation for more than 35 years. He's the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of Energies 2050, a French-based international non-profit organization active in more than 70 countries. He has worked for several international and national institutions and has set up, coordinated, and participated in more than 250 international projects supporting international institutions, national and subnational governments, local authorities, as well as multi-stakeholders coalitions, CSOs, public or private organizations. He's a specialist in the development and implementation of strategies to fight climate change and of programs of actions and low carbon development projects with high innovation potential in the fields of mitigation, adaptation, resiliency, sustainable cities and territories, in addition to capacity building programs and access to climate finance. Stefan has extensive experience in a significant number of countries worldwide. He is the author of over 200 technical publications, and he has also founded or co-founded and is involved in several international initiatives such as the Climate Task Force of United Cities and Local Governments of Africa, Arts Planet, Francophonie Initiative for Sustainable Cities, Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, Ethic Carbon, and so on. So, Stefan.
Okay, hello everyone. So I will share my screen. Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you.
So hopefully it will work. Okay, partager. Yes, I know. Yes. I need to. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. No, it's working.
Now.
Okay. Okay, simply perfect. So, everyone. So, thank you for the invitation and also the very nice presentation just before. And frankly speaking, they already set the scene, so it will be more easy for me to jump into the discussion. So as it was presented, so I don't know why it's not working. Okay, so as it was already presented, so Energy 2050, just to give some few words, we are an NGO, we are a so-called project-based NGO, so it means we receive no public funds to be fully independent, and we run projects in quite a number of countries. And our vision is to work on a systemic approach of development. Climate change being one of them, but there are so many transversal issues to be, let's say, endorsed at the same point, like genders, vulnerable population, biodiversity, and many of them are, let's say, interconnected. So far we work on this issue, and we work through governments and running to cities, and also at the end running to citizens. Just to give 2 or 3 examples for governments linking with climate change and biodiversity, we are doing some INDC. For those who know the climate process, we are supporting them to develop their national strategic long term. Also the INDC to fulfill their Paris Agreement commitments. We are doing the same situation with the local governments and on the systemic approach. And by the way, we are doing at the end some communication and research also for the different group of stakeholders. So just to say, we want to have this vertical and transversal systemic approach, because for us, the answer cannot be, let's say, only one topic to be concerned, but it has to be, let's say, something to be comprehensive enough to involve many competencies. So at the end, the change, the engagements can really make sense in the long term, because this will be the discussions today to see how we can engage, but not only engage in the short term, but also engage in the long run. And this is a very difficult point, and we need to think how we can tackle this really challenging schizophrenic approach we all almost, let's say, have in our daily lives by consuming, but also by deciding where we can, let's say, hack something to reduce our footprint. So we publish reports, we are doing projects, quite a number of European projects. We are also committed to many, let's say, conferences like UNFCCC, ECOSOC, and some others. So at the end, so we are doing quite a lot of things. And going back also to the Renaissance project and the arts and culture, it has been presented by the previous speaker. We have also designed an initiative. So it's a Arts Planet. It's connected to how we can, let's say, make citizens to be concerned about the change and also to feel personally involved. And this will be also a point to be discussed today. If we expect to have some change at the end, we really need to have, let's say, a personal commitment. This is not something to be intellectual, and this is the main difficult point. Oh, I can be personally concerned where I'm not suffering about scarcity of water, of our resources. This is the main difficulties we need to face on, and this is not something to be so easy. So at the end, we have this kind of initiative, but it is a worldwide now. We are working with the Resiliarts also initiative from UNESCO, and so many of them. So just to say, we are on the ground. And by the way, going back to the topic of today, so clearly we are facing a world of challenges. This is clear, nobody will doubt about that. We have also a clear, let's say, lecture now, and I will say everyone is more than aware now that our, let's say, development model are unsustainable. This is true since decades, but by the way, now I will say, at least with all the different publications and hopefully the last assessment report from the IPCC on adaptation, also just recall again and again that, let's say, this is not sustainable. And in the long term, it will be a disaster. But now we have also the consequences that in the very short term, it will be a disaster. So going back, let's say, to also the topics, we have, I will say, maybe thousands of publications per year. Maybe I'm quite too optimistic, but let's say, okay, hundreds of very large publications per year to re-explain, to reaffirm, to let's say, consider, let's say, the systemic needs when we are doing something or collaborating on something. We have now a clear lecture about the IPCC report, but we have also the PBS report. We can have also the GAP report from UNEP. We can have so many of them are saying the same things. But what is very, let's say, dramatic now is that we have so many data. We can go with a granularity to be really scaled up and also sized to the very local, let's say, situation. So at the end, it is really something quite important. Or we can transform this knowledge into not only political commitment, but I will say personal, economical commitment at the end. And the political one, it's okay, you all know the UNFCCC process and the different COP, and also not only the one on climate change, but also on biodiversity, desertification, forest, all the international multi-environmental government, let's say, agreements. But so far, nobody will, let's say, trust anymore on this issue if we don't have something also as a bottom-up approach to, let's say, transform, let's say, the political overview commitment into something to be concrete enough. And this is why we have to work with local governments and at the end also with, let's say, companies and also citizens. So going back to the last report, so for those who want to have a look, there is a very interesting small video which has been produced by UNDP, and it's very interesting because it's speaking about extinction of species, and it's very funny because, okay, it's not funny, but it's very well done because it is a dinosaur who explains that he knows the story, and we can avoid something if we do something now, but that's the story. So going back also to the last report, so I'm sure every one of you already have a look to this very important masterpiece published late in February this year. So, and going back especially to the vulnerability of people and on water issues, it's very important because we have crazy figures. We already know that, but so far now they have a very interesting concept I will detail after. And so because we know that at least 3.3, 3.67, and even 4 billion of people are suffering somewhere. And depending the scenarios, the 6 scenarios from the IPCC, it will be more than dramatic with quite a significant movement of persons and scarcity of resources. But going back to also the understanding, and this is very important because when we speak about water, it is also the concept of maladaptation, which is very relevant. And when we speak about scope 1, 2, 3, it is also a way how we are going to organize circulation of materials, raw material, but also transformed materials. And that we are at the end buying somewhere with no connection to the full, let's say, channel of value when we are producing or consuming something. So it's very interesting because now we have the greenhouse gas emission. We know this is created by the crazy approach about fossil fuel, the consumption, and also fossil fuel subsidies. Just a small remark on this issue. If we go back to the cost of subsidies for fossil fuels, and you can compare also what's going on in EU so far with the Russian, so it's cost 6.5% of the global GDP worldwide. So the ones who just recall that we are lacking of money to transform something and to transform a pattern of consumption are just something wrong, because we are spending so much money just to, let's say, sustainable type of energy, which is also creating locking effect. And this is the same with resources. In Energy 2050, we are not speaking only on energy transition, we are speaking about resource transition. So we need to have a sobriety, but the use of resource. Also, we need to have efficiency when we are obliged to use a resource. And after, we need to use renewable resources. So, but going back to this new, let's say, schemes developed for the last assessment report from IPCC, it was very interesting because now also they focus on maladaptation. What does it mean? It means when we have degraded a situation somewhere, and my past colleague just presented about the water footprint, and it's dramatic because when we have something which is already more or less locking, it is, let's say, very, let's say, difficult because it means that all the time they will produce something which is degraded and will increase the level of degradations about their livelihood. So this is something very dramatic. And by the way, also one conclusion, and it's very important, among others about waters, because now, even in IPCC, they consider that adaptations, you all know adaptation concept, definition, will not be part of the, let's say, successful story to avoid consequences of climate change. So what does it mean? It means that adaptation has to be part of the change. And it's very interesting because now, and this is something we are fighting since decades on these subjects, we want to measure also additionality about adaptation. So when we make a circulation about the process, about the footprint or whatever, we need to create indicators. And indicators are not only for one type of, let's say, resources, but they have to be connected to the global perspective. What does it mean? For those who don't know, in fact, we have a, let's say, a process of so-called monitoring, reviewing, and verification. This is very well known for UNFCCC on climate change, but by the way, we have so far in 2023 the global stocktakes to, let's say, focus on the progress of Paris agreements. And so we are fighting, and I assume many of my colleagues also fighting to have, let's say, a clear vision about transparency. So it has to be reinforced, but not only to demonstrate what we are doing, but to be in position at the end to educate guys. What does it mean? We need to be in position for anything. And this is something to be very urgent. We need to be in position to evaluate, all on social, economics, and environmental concern, and as well as human rights, okay, to have clear indicators. And these indicators has to be consistent to the ones used by countries for their national reporting, to be also consistent to the ones they use at international level when they are reporting whatever the, let's say, conventions they are working on, because at the end, we need to be consistent on our monitoring. And when we create some, let's say, mechanism to answer this issue, it has to be so clear for the citizens, the consumer. So at the end, he can decide. Otherwise, we trust he will not be in position to decide. And maybe he will make a good choice on, let's say, okay, one product, one type of products, but at the end, it is only part of a big puzzle and it will be insufficient. So we need to, let's say, make trusty, and especially about engagements, that we are in position and we are fully in. We all know the story, we all know the process. We need to demonstrate that at the end, we are in position to make the calculation for anything. And when it will be, let's say, well known, and it can be very soon, it's really a political, but also a technical concept, and also each of the NGO networks working on this topic has to enlarge. What does it mean? To also consider different pillars which are, let's say, consistent with its own concerns. So when I speak about water, I speak about food, I speak about consumption. When I speak about energy, I speak about water, I speak about land use, I speak about infrastructure, I speak about, and all the time it's a puzzle. It's complex, but this is a vision we need to develop. So this is the point. So I will not go too much in detail on this one. Okay, finally, we have also very interesting, inspiring position and discussions, UNESCO among others, but not only, all the UN agency and also quite significant number of NGO and also networks are producing a kind of swift in the mankind. What does it mean? And this is something very important for my NGO and also for us. At the end, we need to, let's say, really feel concerned by the topic. And this is something very important. I just mentioned here one report, but there are thousands. And okay, we can share many lists on this issue. It's very important. What does it mean? It means that at the end, and I go back to the introduction of my speech, we need guys to understand that it is not only unsustainable for, let's say, the global lecture, but also it is unsustainable for all the pillars of my, let's say, own perception feeling of what can be my common future. And it can be at families level, but also at local level, at, let's say, professional level, and for sure at national and international level. And so this is very important. And going back to what I've been asked for, so the organizer just mentioned one of a small project we have undertaken a few years ago. It was an Erasmus project, but we are running quite a significant number of projects on this issue with quite large networks. And I remember in the chat at the beginning, it was one guy was saying some networks were missing on North Africa. And this is true, but there are so many, let's say, very impressive networks working on this issue, like the CMI, and which is with UNOPS and the World Bank, and also the UCLG Africa, like also the FEMIS. So many guys are working on this issue. And so the water really is well endorsed also in this area. But going back to the project, I want also to just give a few words on this issue. It was a few years ago as an Erasmus project. And the point was to try to educate scholars about their water footprints. So for sure, we were referring to the official methodologies, because at the end, we don't need to recreate something, but just to consolidate knowledge. And so at that time, it was interesting because guys were usually very far to understand that they have direct water consumption and indirect ones. So it has been really well explained by the previous speakers. I will not go too much in detail, but at the end, it was very interesting because it was quite successful, and we had very nice video, also quite a significant number of materials to educate and to make people to feel concerned. And so this is a point. And so for those who want to go later on this issue, it's interesting. But again, we need to think that when we want to, let's say, focus on one topic, we need also to explain people again what can be the different options to go beyond. What does it mean? Because it's very dangerous to imagine that working not at a systemic approach will be successful somewhere. What does it mean? For example, you just have heard that the Commission, the European Union, wants to work on a carbon taxes. So it's good, it's wonderful, but this will be an internal market. What does it mean? We can have also very negative points, because the ones which are now suffering, it was the case for Pakistan, if I remember well, the previous presentation, but this guy has destroyed their environment to produce, let's say, products for us. So now if we create some, let's say, conditionality for them to sell even poor quality products, can you imagine they are double penalized? So this has to be something, again, we need all to complain and to recall, to enlarge this approach and to be consistent while offering opportunities, while also proposing to change not only for us the patterns, but also to focus how we can, let's say, support transition elsewhere. And this issue of solidarity has to be one indicator. And I make a friendly signal to my colleagues who speak about the footprints, but I'm sure they already endorse this point, that at the end, it has also to create, let's say, bilateral solidarity. What does it mean? If I change my consumption patterns, it has to be also positive for the ones which has been suffering while producing poor quality environmental ones products. Otherwise, it will be a double penalization. So I will stop here because I think I'm too long. I'm sorry for that. And for sure, I will be more than happy to answer any kind of question at the end. Thank you for that.
So, Stefan, thank you so much for your great presentation. And now let's move to our next speaker. So, okay. So, Ciprian Nanu is an innovation expert with more than 25 years experience in countries in Eastern Europe. He is a graduate of the Polytechnic Institute of Bucharest and a partner and a senior consultant in the company Business Development Group. His professional experience, relevant for the current project, is connected with the leading of various pilot projects concerning the transfer of new and innovative technologies in the environmental and energy sectors in Romania and other markets in Europe. As part of various international consultancy project teams, Ciprian Nanu was responsible for the project management and coordination of the technical project local activities on site. So, Ciprian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anja. I hope you see my screen.
Yes, very well, thank you.
Yeah. So you probably realize from what Anja was talking that I'm not a researcher, I'm not a professor, but I'm a very practical guy. And our role in the sister project of NAIADES, which is called, in our case, Firewire for Water, it was my role. It was to find another angle to tackle the water issues and the water topics in general. And because I'm based in Bucharest, I was looking for a region which is a little bit less known in Europe, is lower Basin Danube. And when I'm talking in my presentation about this region, I'm talking mainly about countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary, and a little bit of Moldova. You realize that when I cannot move, I cannot move this. Oh, yes. You realize that when we started 3 years ago our Firewire for Water project, I was looking to different water topics, but mainly digitalization services in general, because in our lower Danube basin, the water utilities are let's say, having a special position in lower Danube, at the end of the Danube, at the entrance in Black Sea, in the country that I mentioned. All of them are public owned, with few exceptions like Bucharest and Szeged and maybe others. Their own IT department, they have, of course, very usual applications like SCADA, but they have a very limited contribution to their companies, and they don't have a database, they don't have archives, and of course they are not using modern IT applications or open platforms. Also, what was surprising for me, because they have a limited role in their companies, they also have a limited wish to cooperate, not only between them and the other departments in their companies, but also, let's say, the IT department in the water utility in Bucharest is not willing too much to cooperate with the water utility in, let's say, Zagreb or in Belgrade, you know. And even worse, they don't have a digitalization strategy. And of course, this was the first step. We've been talking about IT and applications, but all the other water topics that I mentioned in long telephone calls, like circular economy or water energy food nexus, they are not, these topics are not, I found that they are not relevant for our water utilities in general in Eastern Europe. but mainly in the countries on the lower Basin Danube. This is actually a presentation which is the continuation of Richard's presentation about quintuple helix. Of course, he was talking about quintuple helix, but in my experience in the last 3 years, I was very much involved with quadruple helix. The cultural part, for me, it was very difficult. I don't know your experiences in lower Basin Danube, but if you are driving maybe 200 kilometers in one direction, you might find 2 or 3 cultures. So for me in Bucharest, it's very difficult to to cooperate with people, and maybe the concepts that I'm trying to explain to them on the telephone are different angles of their different cultures. What I did, you remember that we started maybe in Firewire for what, 3 years ago. I was in front of a map of lower Basin Danube, and with this new approach that we started to implement in our project, we wanted to touch also a kind of social innovation aspect. So don't look too much from up to bottom initiatives, because all of us in Eastern Europe, we've been living until 1 generation ago in centralized systems, and everybody was waiting from the boss to say what to do in that day. But the other approach from bottom to up, it was not very well developed here. And I stayed in front of a map. I was trying to select something like 30 or 35 water utilities and municipalities, and try to find on the telephone if they are willing to cooperate for future partnerships. They didn't know too much about social innovation and political engagement, and they didn't know too much about end client satisfaction. When I was talking about when I was questioning what is your end client, they said the municipality. And the question, it was the following one, it was, do you realize that the citizen, it's your client? And they didn't answer anything. So what we try to do is to change this opinion. It is not a water utility municipality relation. It's at least a quadruple helix relation, and of course citizens in this constellation. It's an important part of it. In a local water forum, we selected municipalities, utilities, citizens, professors, and we place them in one room, or it doesn't matter if it is Zoom or an innovation room in one city, and place them and ask them to talk about water topics. It's surprising that nobody in cities like Timișoara or Belgrade, nobody tried such thing before. The people, they know each other, they've heard about each other, but they don't know how to do it. So this was one of the initiatives of our project and our team. We placed the people together and we asked them to discuss water topics. We selected few topics from different stakeholders, and we co-designed together with them what is the next step to be achieved. And I may say that, if I have to say that an agenda in Timișoara is different than the agenda of water in Belgrade, and very different from the agenda of water in Chișinău. What we have 3 years later, I think it's a positive result, a new approach, a bottom-up approach based on citizen initiatives, and it's a growing network. Countries like Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova are already involved. We have in this region on the Danube, lower basin, something like 12 local water forums already started, some of them with 2 or 3 meetings already. For this spring, we hope to realize 3 others in Romania, Moldova, and Bulgaria. And this is only a part of a bigger global water forum network, which consists of probably 30 or 35 groups of people and forums in Europe, Africa, and South America. And my basic message, because I have to be short in this presentation, it's coming, even the most important part of the presentation, it's a movie. And we want to present you, and I think Mike is here, Mike Machin from Great Torrington Water Forum. He is the initiator over there, together with some colleagues from University of Exeter. We want to present you in that movie what it is actually a local water forum in UK. But if you know this kind of, if you think that this kind of initiatives are important, and if you know municipalities or citizens which can take responsibility of initiating this kind of discussion, bottom-up discussions, in order to try to find locally how to solve the problems of water in general, please let us know, because yeah, I wrote here my email. And also, I'm happy to answer to your questions after that. And now I'm thinking to realize that my first part of the presentation is ended, and I'd like to ask Anja or Anna to click on the YouTube link.
Yes.
It's a presentation of Great Torrington Local Water Forum, and it's a very good example of it. Thank you.
Okay, so you see it, and I will play it.
Hello, great to be here today. I'm Dr. Kate Baker, and I'm a research fellow in the Centre for Water Systems at the University of Exeter. Today we're going to be talking about the Great Torrington Water Forum, which started earlier this year, and it's been co-created by the University of Exeter, South West Water, and the community of Great Torrington. And it's part of the UN World Water Quality Alliance, and is part of the Fireware for Water project. So in this presentation, we're going to share insight on how we created these community engagement activities that are part of the Fireware for Water project, which is the next generation of internet services for the water sector. This is an EU-funded research project. There are various demo case studies across the EU, and as you can see on the map here, one is led by South West Water, which is in Great Torrington. So Great Torrington is based in the southwest. It's in Devon, and the Water Forum was launched in January 2020, right in the middle of lockdown. So we had to do it all online. And this method is citizen-led, and it follows the community's interest to develop activities to do the following. So we wanted to raise awareness of water usage in the town, and secondly, we wanted to introduce the concept of digital water, including South West Water's new smart water meters that are being installed in the town. So we kicked off with a meeting on the 21st of January. This was online. We advertised it through Facebook, and also Great Torrington Council helped us advertise it. The first meeting was all about idea submission and getting to know each other, and we spoke about local and global water issues as well as solutions, and we've listed a few things here. We spoke about spheres of influence and what you can do as an individual, and how you can do so much more if you're part of a community. The second meeting, we sort of refined these ideas, and also met up with South West Water. They joined, who gave a really good overview of the smart water meters that are going to be fitted in Great Torrington, and created a space for Q&A. The third thing was community voting. So we discussed all these amazing ideas that the Great Torrington Water Forum could do to raise awareness of not using so much water. And these ideas, they were listed in the survey, and everyone voted on what they would like the Water Forum to do. It's important to have different formats to collect information from the community during online meetings and in-person meetings. Sometimes the more confident people speak up, so it was great to use a survey to make sure that all voices were heard. So now we're going to hear from the Water Forum to find out exactly what they did. So we've got Jill Clayton, Liz Nab and Mike Matchin. So over to you, Jill.
Hello. Once we knew what we were doing, really, that we knew we needed to get started and actually start to involve the community. So thinking about how to actually start that campaign with the community, the obvious choice for us was our local news magazine, The Crier, which comes out every month, and a lot of people in Torrington read it. So we knew that if we could get something in there, then quite a lot of people would be able to see what we had started doing. What we managed to do was to book the front cover, and we also booked a double-page spread right in the middle of the magazine, so that that could be pulled out and people could keep it, so that they could keep the information. As you can see from the slide, we're looking at particular areas and thinking about how we could save water in the home or water usage as well, in the garden, globally, and our local environment around Torrington. The cover that we used, we tried to put some sort of shock tactic on there to get people interested in seeing what was inside and getting interested in our campaign. And that was just a bit of an idea of trying to give people the idea of how much water is actually used in Great Torrington in a particular time span. So that was sort of we hoped was quite a strong image. The other thing that we included was trying to involve children. And it was the good old favourite of poster. But we thought that, you know, if we could get posters from the kids, then we can actually use those in advertising or, you know, getting more people involved. So we've put in the Crier that idea of actually making a poster along with some children's sort of games and things to do with water. And so far we've had a few entries, and it's really lovely seeing those coming in and the kids getting involved and engaged. So that was our first introduction to actually making the plan a reality. And I'll hand you over to Kate now. Back to now. I'll hand you over to Liz. Sorry, Liz.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, so we've mapped out a series of articles covering water issues, ranging from water use in the home, garden, and then extending into the impact of our behaviour in the environment and globally. And they're all planned for the printed articles in the Crier. But we are aware that there are still many people who choose not to read our printed articles, and that it was going to be really important to launch a social media campaign in parallel with the printed articles. So that's what we've done. We're aware that there is already lots of activity on various town Facebook pages. So we picked Facebook. We also went for Instagram because we can be very visual with that channel. And we've also got a LinkedIn account. And although we don't post as often on that, that's really to extend to other stakeholders in the wider community and get inspiration for the social media posts on Facebook and Instagram. What we have noticed is that the level of engagement with Facebook and Instagram posts is far higher when the post is something very Torrington specific. So Southwest Water have helped with that because they've been able to give us some actual data to inspire our posts. And now I'll hand over to Mike, who will talk about our other ideas for the future.
Thanks, Liz. One of the ideas that came up at one of the forum meetings was to have a walk around the town. Now, like Doug said, we're not a big town. We're not a massive city like Birmingham or London. We're a very small town, and you'd think that we knew enough about the town without walking around it. But when you look around in detail with the thought, how do we save water? Where can we save water in the community? Then quite a few ideas pop up that you wouldn't even realize before. The obvious ones, we have 3 public toilets in the town. They're all open roofed. The water goes direct to drain from the roof. Those roof drains can be connected to some form of harvesting and that water used for flushing the toilets. Other buildings like the town hall, the Plough, which is a local theatre, is another opportunity that we could use along with the rugby club and some of the allotments we have around here. What we decided to do from that list of opportunities was pick the low-hanging fruit. What you can see in front of you now is one of the old buildings we have in town, which houses the library. There is a small cafe there, and there's a community hall, which is used for various events. There are big gardens around there. The area is called the 1646. It relates back to the Civil War in Torrington. And it's a very aesthetic area. So the water butts that we could use have to fit in with the surroundings. And what we've chosen is the small butts you can see in the picture there, which look like Greek urns. They're not, they are water butts. They have a unit on top where you can plant flowers. And these will be submitted to Southwest Water, who have a water saving community fund for funding the purchase of these, and they will be installed hopefully this year.
Great, thanks, Mike. So just to quickly wrap up, as you can see, the Great Torrington Water Forum is really led by the community. The researchers and Southwest Water are there to support where we can. The forum is part of the World Water Quality Alliance, and these new forums are going to be popping up all around the world, and we're really excited to link up these forums so learnings and challenges, ideas can be shared among them. If you're interested in finding out more, then you can download this document that can be found at firewareforwater.eu. And if you've got any questions, then do get in touch. We're really excited to see how this all develops because it's all quite fresh. But yeah, thanks very much for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Ciprian, for your presentation and also for the video. And now, let's move. Now let's move to our last presentation. So let me just. Okay. Our last presentation will be delivered by James Mercer. He's a data scientist at Southwest Water. He's solving ad hoc problems surrounding drinking water using data-driven methods. And Joshua Pocock, he's a data strategy and reporting manager at Southwest Water, delivering smarter reporting and better customer service across operation using data engineering and data science. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anja. I'll just share my screen. Cool. Can you guys see this?
Not yet. Yes, yes.
How about now? Cool. All right. So my name's James, as Anja said, from Southwest Water. And today I will be talking alongside Josh Pocock about smart meter data and how we got customers to engage with us by using it. So I guess the first sort of question would be, why do we want to engage customers? We can use customer engagement to sort of reduce energy use and drive down consumptions of water resources and reduce leakage. But the meters which we use at the moment don't sort of provide that level of analysis and knowledge, because they are, at the moment, we either use dumb meters or unmetered sort of processes to sort of monitor the consumption of water on a domestic level. Only a very small, as you can see, only a very small proportion of customers have AMR meters, and which are a level up from dumb meters. And then at the very top, we've only got 100 smart meters. So we used smart meters in Great Torrington to sort of see if we can reduce consumption even further using new technology, which will give us more high resolution data to allow us to sort of uncover sort of behavioral patterns I use on consumer consumption of water. So what makes engagement difficult? Well, in the UK, water is valued a lot less than gas and electricity, mostly because it's a lot more expensive. So yearly water and sewage bills come to around £397 per year, whereas gas and electricity comes to almost, over £1,000 a year. So customers pay a lot more for gas and electricity, which means that there's less customer incentive to actually change their consumption, because they don't see, a lot of customers don't see it as a utility that is has a lot of value to it compared to their other sort of bills and outgoings month by month. So on top of that, energy companies are highly competitive on pricing. So they'll sort of charge customers very, very closely to the amount they use. Whereas, like I said before, in the UK, especially at South West Water, which covers Devon and Cornwall, as well as Isles of Scilly and recently Bournemouth Water, we sort of we only have sort of dumb meters and unmetered estimates of customer usage. Another facet to consider is the operational costs of actually monitoring the customers using smarter meters. So there's high operational costs to replacing meter batteries, as well as sort of more technical and sort of more higher resolution meters not working as well due to poor signal when they're fitted underground. So when you fit these meters, a lot of the times you'll have to hire a whole team of technicians to go underground and fit these meters, whereas in electricity and gas, you have to it's simply just fitting it to the live wire going into the properties. So it's a difficult business, is sort of getting this data. But using technology, we have the potential to sort of engage customers using this new tech, using sort of better smart meters and helping to reinforce sort of positive behavioural changes. So we've sort of been at South West Water, along with University of Exeter. We've been working to develop a South West Water app for currently trialling at Great Torrington, to allow users to interrogate their water usage and compare themselves to others and set targets to and earn incentives to reduce their water consumption. So they'll get metrics like yesterday's consumption, leaderboards, anonymous comparisons with the rest of their local area, and statistics on their own consumption. So using technology, you can sort of use this raw data which we're getting from the smart meters and present it back to the customers. And that way you can improve customer service from a provider point of view, but also the provider gets better data using these smart meters. And this helps to empower customers to reduce their water bills, because currently there's a lot of, well, it's quite poorly communicated around to the customers around their water usage. As stated before, the current standard is using dumb meters and unmetered estimates for billing customers. And I'll pass over to Josh about how the app was developed using a local water forum at Great Torrington.
Thanks, James. Can you just share your screen?
Yeah, has it not been sharing?
I think it's just stopped sharing.
Okay.
So whilst James is trying to reshare his screen, you've already heard about the water forum, so I won't repeat what's already been said, but I'll talk to you about what it means to us as a water company and how it's been super helpful for us to develop this technology, the smart app. So you've seen a picture like this earlier. This is the Great Torrington Water Forum, and our journey as South West Water, we started engaging these customers on the ground pre-COVID, so when we could actually be face to face. And the first challenge we had was we needed to get these smart meters installed, and actually that's harder to do than you think. So customers are a little bit wary about it. Why are you putting a smart meter on my property? Are you going to be Big Brother monitoring me all of the time? But we sent out letters, we did door to door, we had a town hall meeting, and we managed to get 100 people to sign up and say, yep, I'll take a smart meter. And we've had a few more come along the way. But the key thing is we've got these smart meters in the ground, they're measuring the customer's consumption, and we can now use that data and put it back into the app to show them. We move on, James. And this for me is the real interesting bit that we've already touched on a little bit around this kind of co-design of the app. We as a water company, South West Water, we know we're all customers of our own company, so to speak. We all use water. We know what we think would work really well with an app, what we think would engage customers, but really we want to canvass opinion across a wide range of customers, and that's exactly what we did. So what you see in front of you here on this slide is a Miro board. You may have used it, and you'll see there's loads of post-it notes which are effectively all the ideas that the water forum came up with about, okay, well, what features do you want in your app? And I can probably split those into three main themes. The first one being visibility and awareness. So customers want to see their water consumption. They can't do that at the moment. We meter read a couple of times a year. That's the best they get. To actually see what you used yesterday is a huge step change for everybody. And they want to be able to set targets to say, well, you know what? I can see I'm using 400 litres per property today. That's quite high. Maybe I could drop down to 350 and save myself 100 quid a year on my water bill or something like that. So they wanted to have a way to set those targets and be alerted if, you know, if their consumption is too high. I certainly know with kids and baths and all the, and hose pipes, you know, I you know, might want to use a certain amount of water, but you know, I'm not here in the day, and the kids might be filling up a swimming pool the previous day, you know, I wouldn't know about it. So it's being able to empower the customer to really understand, you know, what water are we using, you know, what's driving our behaviour. The second thing on there is competition. Really interesting one, competition. You know, I think people want to compete with themselves and with others. So, you know, with themselves, I've already said about setting targets. You know, yes, I can better myself. You know, we're all into our Apple Watches, you know, fitness gadgets or whatever that help us to earn badges for doing a certain amount of steps or workouts or calories or, you know, whatever. People enjoy that feedback of, yeah, look, I've done something, I've earned something. So, you know, there on the line, we certainly want to build that kind of thing into the app, you know, on a personal level. And then kind of the other side of that is competing with others. So, you know, what are my neighbours using? What is the rest of Great Tourism using? What's the rest of the Southwest using? Am I good? Am I bad? Having the smart meter data allows us to find that and to show that to customers. And I guess collectively as well, it enables them to, you know, as a community, you know, as Great Torrington, well, is Great Torrington the most water efficient town in the whole of Devon? You know, that could be a great motivator if we were to pitch them against, you know, another similar sized town or whatever, and you get a little bit of kind of friendly competition in that realm. And then the third thing is education. So, you know, I think this is a theme that's come out in the Water Forum, that actually you can see a lot of the posters that they've been putting out, the initiatives they've had with schools, etc. And it's all about education. People don't value water. People don't understand how do I save water? How do I do it? So the app could contain tips to reduce consumption. It might contain a chat bot, for example, to talk about water efficiency. There's a big thing about leakage. You know, if you've got a leaking supply pipe, so that's the pipe that goes from basically from their property's boundary into the customer's property, or some internal plumbing losses like leaking loo or a leaking tap or whatever. You know, what on earth do you do? You know, could you take a photo, self-diagnose, send it into Southwest Water, and we'll tell you how to fix it. And there's no need for us as Southwest Water just to have to send somebody out and the customer to have to wait 2 weeks for that person to come and fix it. And games for, you know, games for adults, games for kids, gamification is a massive one, and it's you know, there's a big kind of request, if you like, for gamification of educational materials to help kids to start thinking about water, and also to help adults as well. So we you know, we put all of those ideas, everything we've got in there, into a design scope for the app, and that's now been developed by University of Exeter. And we're just getting to the point now where we're actually going to allow that app to be downloaded on the App Store on Android phones, and certain and the members of the forum and also the other customers of smart meters, you know, we want them to download the app and test it out. So that's where we are right now in terms of kind of our progress to date on this. So we're really looking forward to seeing the feedback on that app. And if you just move on to the last slide, James, I'll just very quickly mention that, you know, we Southwest Water are just amazed at how empowered the Great Torrington Water Forum has become, and that's through the efforts from, you know, University of Exeter, Fireware for Water, ourselves, and obviously most of all the efforts of the people involved themselves. And, you know, this is key for us, is that we need to have groups of customers like this that can self-motivate, maintain momentum. They don't need hand-holding. You know, we can set the tone, we can support them with initiatives, we can you know, support them where needed, but to do it across the whole Southwest and Bournemouth, we really need a grassroots initiative. And I think, you know, really hope that the Great Torrington Water Forum model will naturally grow as people get more and more interested in water, the value of water, and all that good stuff. So on that, I'll close and hand back over to Anja.
Okay. So, James and Joshua, thank you for this great presentation. So this was the last presentation for today. And now I would welcome all the speakers to please turn on your cameras as we will begin with our panel discussion. So I would kindly ask you to turn on your cameras. And I'm sure that there are a lot of questions, and I would kindly ask all the participants to post them in chat. And maybe we can begin with the first question from chat by Tuli Lukmus. A question to Rick. How much does food waste contribute to water footprint? What about textiles? Would reducing those have a significant impact for water sustainability in some regions? So this is a question for Rick.
Yes, thanks for that question. I already tried to quickly address it in the chat. And how long do you have? No, I will just try to answer it very quickly. But the numbers that I mentioned do not include food waste, even though that, and food losses, even though that's a very substantial share. And you can imagine that the water that is needed to produce the food that eventually is not being eaten or consumed, but that is lost or wasted, has a one-on-one relation with the footprint that you're wasting indirectly then as well. So that's a major component, of course, of the total water footprint. The difficulty is the recommendation is easy, reduce the food waste and the food loss, but the loss and waste is really spread out over the supply chain. So every actor has in the supply chain of food has a percentage of waste or loss that you would have to account for. So addressing it is actually much more difficult than just recommending to address it. But yes, it's a very substantial part, and good to raise the awareness on that part as well. For the textiles, yeah, you really have to dive into it because it's so specific. The water, the site specificity of water is so important here, and especially for goods or commodities that are sourced from international markets, it's really difficult to trace the value chains all the way back to the locations of origins, and that's often where the impacts lie. So that really would need a deeper investigation on the commodity level. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And now I have a question for Esther González. Do you think that through your project, children can exert influence also in other areas?
I think so, because children tend to absorb knowledge, and this knowledge will be useful for their personal life and in terms of saving water at home by teaching their parents how to do it.
Okay, thank you. And maybe one question for Evangelia. How does the Water Consumers Awareness Dashboard motivate students to reduce their school's water consumption? Evangelia? Huh? Okay, maybe we shall move to another question. Is Evangelia here?
NAIADES school dashboard uses different.
Yes, please.
NAIADES school dashboard uses different persuasive strategies to motivate students to reduce their school's water consumption, such as self-monitoring, badge on rewards, suggestions. It provides information regarding the school's consumption compared to other schools in three different types, as I presented earlier.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question by Anna Brekin for Rick again, and also for Richard, Stefan, and Ciprian. Your thoughts are on the same question are very welcome. So the question would be, would you have any concrete recommendations for the EU policy makers and regulators in the field of smart water management to address this issue this pressing issue? So please, Rick, and then Richard, Stefan, Ciprian.
Yeah, many caveats came to mind when I saw this question pop up in the chat. But thinking about it, I think we can clearly not address all of these. There are a lot of things that need to be done. But I think that I would remain at one key point, and that is that many of the water problems that we face, be it water scarcity or water pollution, they are not readily addressed by water managers. They are addressed by policymakers in other domains, because it's the spillover effects of those policies that really cause the problems in the first place. So also as water people, on a policy level, we really need to involve those other areas, and that includes agriculture, trade, food, tax and fiscal policies even, because that really has an indirect influence on the status of our water system. So that might also be the invitation for all of us to not just stick to the water sector, but really reach out to policymakers in other domains if we have that opportunity.
I would certainly support what Rick has just said, but I would go further. So, I mean, a lot of us fill our mouths with phrases such as, for example, the WEFE nexus, which is the connection between water, energy, food, and the ecosystem. We still live in a world where administrations address these issues as separate issues. And for example, at the European Commission level, very often you find that different DGs of the European Commission are working on their own subject, sometimes actually working in a way which is counterproductive, because they're either reproducing what other DGs are doing, or they are contradicting the work of other DGs. That's the first problem. Also, there's the question, and I wrote down in the chat when the question first came up, that I think that we need to look at a local level. And I always refer back, when I say local, I mean a municipal level, because that's the closest form of government to the quintuple helix that I was describing before. But what is necessary is that there's a global approach to all of these environmental factors and these social factors. And another factor which is totally ignored very often by researchers in water is the question of health. And really, the WEFE plus H nexus is becoming more and more important. I mean, this was brought to the light over the last 2 years thanks to the COVID pandemic as well. The close relationship that water, energy, food, and the ecosystems also have on human health, and vice versa. So I think it's absolutely vital that when we're talking about, for example, the use of IT, when we're talking about transport, when we're talking about energy production, when we're talking about the building of sustainable homes, when municipalities are trying to complete the 2030 objectives of the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, what they need to do is that they need to recognize the importance of water. But the water sector itself needs to, excuse my French, get a move on, and to actually start relating as well to the other sectors, which it doesn't do. I mean, the water sector itself can be extremely hermetic. And in the same way, I would also encourage the European Union, I think they are beginning to realize this, but I think it's absolutely necessary as well that there's a bilateral dialogue between all of the sectors that I described in the quintuple helix as equal partners permanently, which hasn't existed until now. And for example, researchers ourselves, I've been a politician, and researchers ourselves, we're very good at talking to politicians when we want funding, but we don't talk to them either before or after. We don't talk to them about what it is that society needs us to research. And I think that this is becoming, we're going to, well, we can't afford to do this anymore. We need to break out of our silos and work together. And European legislation can improve that, and it can certainly set the scene for that much more effectively.
Okay, thank you. So Ciprian, do you have any thoughts on this also?
Yes, I have. And I think what we didn't touch today, also because we have no guests from that part of the world is that we don't have partners from local administrations. And now I'm talking about Romania. So it took me, let's say, 1 year or two to have a good relation with the local administration on the Danube and to make themselves to realize that water is an issue, and they promised that they will continue. And after that, the new elections came, and the administration is changed, and you have to start over. So I think the researchers, all the groups interested in water should make the people from the local and central administrations to keep their promises and their programs, because in general in Romania, when a new administration is coming, okay, it's erasing whatever successes or unsuccesses or strategies the previous one made, and they are starting a new one. So my basic message for the local administration is, please continue with the good things, because the water is not an issue to be solved this year. We are talking here about topics for the next generations. So yeah, I will make some efforts in the future, probably together with you, maybe to have a good relation with the local authorities for them to realize that cooperation and partnerships, let's talk more about SDG 17, it's very important in a continuous way.
That is right in there. I mean, that's the whole reason for the creation not only of local water forums, but also local energy forums or local environmental forums, is the fact that if from the very beginning all of the sectors of society are involved in both the co-creation and the implementation of a policy at a local level, and if, for example, the citizens who have been engaged are actually the overseers or the guarantors of that political continuity, then a change of government at a local level isn't important, because a local government will respond to its electorate. And if policies have been established and that there's a general social consensus at a local level, the new party that comes into power, despite political party rivalries between one and another, will not renegade on something that has a broad social consensus. That's actually how the theory behind the local water forums, how the theory of Renaissance itself was developed as a result of observing this phenomenon.
Okay, thank you. What about Stefan? Do you also have some thoughts on this?
Yes, in fact, this is quite a very difficult question, by the way, because we all know that how EU is dealing with country, and at the end, even if the Commission is proposing, basically a country will be, let's say, the ones to decide. So what does it mean? It means that if I was in position to make some suggestion and recommendation, I will try to suggest the Commissions to work having common baseline on the different topics we have explained today. So bridging with different concepts, but a common baseline, at least at EU level, to be in positions to have no, let's say, blocking process with countries when trying to put in place legal frameworks. So this is the first point, and I really think this will help. And on the second point, because now they have a common approach about funding, and this is a significant period to also invest in the future, to try to, as soon as there is a blocking position for countries, to try to anticipate and to make specific lines about finance. So it can be for agriculture, like for France, it can be for many other things, you know. So I think this can be a policy dialogue with the countries at EU level. Going back to the point with the local governments, I frankly believe that almost all of them know the topic. And what they are expected, in my presentation, I was pushing the point about the UCLG Africa, which is an umbrella organization of all the national umbrella organization of cities in Africa. So as you know, this is really, let's say, the largest platform for urbanization worldwide in the next decades. And all these guys are fully concerned. They know the topics, but they are facing one or two things. First, the decentralization process is not existing. So what does it mean? It means that almost everywhere, they are not like in Europe, they are not in position to do what they want. And even if they have the good strategy, they are not in position to have the financial support they need. And so, as you know, they need to invest somewhere. And even if they will be paid back somewhere, they need to invest. So here, also the Commission, and why not countries, and why not international institutions, we need to push, or we can support, not going at political level to fight for decentralization, because many countries will never agree on, but maybe to try, and we develop with UCLG Africa, the so-called, I don't know to deal it in English, so dialogue, the dialogue with local and national authorities on specific agenda, and water, waste, energy can be part of the story. So what to say, and in this dialogue, it's very easy because we can have a decentralized approach with also some opportunity to have public-private consumer partnerships to focus on financing the project. And like that, we can have some things to start to consolidate decentralized concern about. Otherwise, we are just advocating, and guys, they want to do something, especially in water, waste management, but they have not the power to do it, and even not the schemes to report and to attract international or bilateral or national financing. So this can be some recommendation. We need to work to be practical and have looking effect with partners or countries which are in position to block the process. So even if the idea is good, we need to be in position to have a consolidated dialogue with milestones to be measurable, and also with finance to avoid the ones we are going to lose something if we go to the general benefit. So this can be some recommendation to the Commission.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this answer. Thank you so much. And now I would have a question for James and Joshua regarding your presentation. So why hasn't Southwest Water deployed smart meters and smart apps before?
I'll take that one on.
Yeah.
Sorry, my camera's off, just my signal. So James touched on the problem. It's very expensive for us to do this. Not just expensive from a capital point of view. The loggers, the smart meters that we actually install are a couple of £100 a pop, but then you've got to add on the cost of the technician who's installing them. But that's probably no dissimilar to any other industry. If you think about, as James mentioned, your electricity company, gas company who installs a meter, but the big difference is this, and that's that we don't have electricity at source. So there's no, when we put a meter in the ground on a water pipe, there's no electricity, so it's all battery powered, and that battery at the moment will last for, could be 15 years if we only want a reading once a week, 10 years if we want a reading once a day. And if we want to do some really clever stuff like what you get with electricity smart meters, where you can see your data very much live, our batteries would probably last 2 years at most. And so the problem with that is we've got to then go send out a technician to replace those batteries every 2 years. And if we have to do that across 1 million customers, suddenly the costs are huge. And we've really got to understand what's the cost benefit of rolling these things out. So we are rolling out more in North Devon in the UK. We do have a big program, a pilot program to really scale this up. And I think that's going to help us to understand, what are the benefits of having these? Does that offset this very high cost of installing and maintaining these smart meters? So yeah, I think in the next couple of years, we'll have a better understanding of that.
Okay. So we have a question by Michael Matchin in the chat. Is that any different to reading the meters manually?
So it's a really interesting one actually, Mike, because you could ask customers to read their meters manually, just like electricity and gas, but for some reason that is not the culture that we've got, and a lot of our meters, people don't even know where they are. People don't even know they've got a meter. It's a very, I think there has to be a whole piece of work to engage the customer, educate them to say, this is your meter. This is how it works. It's not as embedded in our culture as looking at your gas and electricity meter, is it? So But I think that's a really interesting point, and it is something that I brought up personally in the company, because you could ask customers to read their meter once a month and get a much more accurate bill. But even if you do that, you're not going to get all the benefits that we know that will come with that higher resolution data. So having daily data, 15-minute data, really understanding, blimey, I ran the hose last night and watered the garden. Look how much water I use. If you only read your meter and you provided a meter reading once a week, once a month, that spike in your water use would be lost in all of the other water you've used, and you wouldn't probably even notice it. So it doesn't drive that behaviour like it would if you saw a graph where it said, look, your consumption's bubbling along at, I don't know, 10 litres an hour or something, and then all of a sudden, bam, it jumps up to a huge amount because you filled up that swimming pool. And it's that instant feedback that I think is so valuable, and that's really what the smartphone app will give us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer. And now let's move back to the first presentation by Esther and Evangelia. So will children learn some techniques on how to reduce their use of water during this contest?
Yes, of course, because during the contest, the project will be done by the students, and they will try to let out their creativity and imagination, looking for ideas to reduce the water consumption.
And for Evangelia, you are here. So how would adapt the water consumers awareness dashboard to be used, how it should be adapted to be used in other environments, like, for example, business or public services?
The NAIADES school dashboard is designed for students in order to motivate them to reduce their school's consumption, and be adapted to big water environments such as universities, offices, and public services. In order to do that, the kids-friendly user interface should be changed, and the persuasive messages should be adapted to the new audience.
Okay, thank you. And now I have a question for Richard regarding your presentation. So what is the role of local communities in supranational strategies? Actually.
Well, it goes back a little bit to what Stefan was talking about. And I actually took a note that Stefan was describing the importance of influencing as well the nation states, and I don't agree. The reason why the OECD, the World Bank, the United Nations, and the European Union have recognized the need to work directly with municipalities rather than nation states is because nation states are the obstacle. They're very egocentric, they're all fighting for their own interests, and it's much more difficult for them to find common ground because they're actually rivals. Municipalities have an ability to forget very often, shall we say, more broader national or nationalistic themes or ideologies, and as a result, it's a lot easier to get them to work together. We put this, the first time I put the local water forum concept, which was then called consensus, into action, was in the Middle East. And instead of getting Israel to work with Palestine and Jordan, I got Jerusalem and Tel Aviv to work with Gaza, with Ramallah and the Greater Amman municipality. And because we were doing it at a local level, we could avoid all of the national obstacles, including basically what was basically an open conflict. And we were able to create local, again, it was based on water in that case, we were able to create local forums that were able to identify local problems and directly engage citizens, because national governments are not capable of directly talking to citizens. Local governments are, local communities can work together. You can create that. Then our job, for example, from the WWQA perspective, is to try and bring these local communities together so that they're also in dialogue with each other. And so now we have a situation where, for example, I'll go back to the example that I've given, where that picture, for example, came from was from Jordan when we were working on this approach at the beginning, which is really science diplomacy. But we now have a situation where we have the Palestinians working with the Israelis, working together with the Jordanians. We're not the only people to do it. Echo Peace also does this. Echo Peace, which was begun 20 years ago in Israel, also takes this approach working with the local communities. It's to get over that nationalistic obstacle. And for example, in Europe, probably one of the best examples of a European move towards creating awareness about the environment has been the Covenant of Mayors. Now, the Covenant of Mayors was started in 2006, 2007. I myself was a mayor at the time, and I remember signing my town into that agreement. That now reaches the vast majority of the population of Europe. It has over 9,000 municipal signatories that represent nearly 400 million people who are involved in being able to reduce by 30% the contamination in their cities, by increasing renewable energy production by 30%, and by, more importantly, at least just as importantly, by increasing energy efficiency in buildings. And it's only by engaging that you can get over these obstacles, and you can only do that at a local level. But also, and this is where Renaissance was born with us and the collaboration between us and the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, was that we discovered that by working with municipalities as well, we were creating also a form of diplomacy that we hadn't even suspected. So I think the local communities are absolutely essential. And as I said before, it's not just me saying that. I mean, I work with the World Bank, I work with the UN, I work with the OECD, and they have all come out and they have all said the same thing. Not in vain, the OECD, one of the most important reports on water, the OECD, is called Water Governance in Cities. So I believe I very much am a municipal, shall we say, not aficionado, I am a municipal supporter.
Okay, Josh wrote to the chat, impressive. What has driven this investment? Water resources leakage regulation?
Maybe my colleague Ignacio can give just the details.
Okay. Okay, so we have the details.
Yeah. Could you please repeat the question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, could you please? Yeah.
So there is a question in the chat. What has driven the investment? Water resources leakage regulation?
Oh yes. I think that the main driver is the scarcity of resources in Alicante, which has one of the highest water stress levels in Spain. Is the main driver. I must say, in any case, that also the support of the municipality, of the local administration, has been key to achieve this. So we started 10 years ago, and we've been, as quickly, the lifespan of a water meter is 10 years, so we have been replacing all water meters by smart water meters in these 10 years. So that's why we have reached such a high percentage of smart water metering. We are using radio technology, which is has a long life battery expectancy. So it's more or less the battery lasts 14 years, which is more or less the life expectancy of the water meter.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. And now I have a question for Stefan. You have talked about the major international agendas on climate, biodiversity, or adaptation. So can you explain to us in a few words what the role of consumer and citizen can and should be to answer these major challenges?
Okay, thank you for the question. In fact, I think it's connected also to the discussion about local governments. They have to be somewhere in the discussion. And the missing point is so far that in this international agenda, there are not, let's say, stakeholders to negotiate. So if we look to for example, the UNFCCC, let's say, process, states are negotiating, but because now they are struggling to have larger commitments, everyone recalls to have additional special day. And among others, we have the ones for cities, we have the ones from buildings, we have the one from methane. So just to say that at the end, all the observer groups are not, let's say, connected to the global discussion. And one group among others, as observers to the UN process is, let's say, citizen, local community, research organizations, cities, and many additional ones. What does it mean? So these guys has to be organized, and how they can be involved, I assume they can be involved by proposing something to be concrete. One colleague in the chart explaining the Glasgow, let's say, pact on water, food. There are many other ones. There is also a parallel Glasgow agreement. So many topics are on this direction, and I think they are fully appropriate. And the power of, let's say, consumers, citizens, cities is to propose options and to make options credible. And I will just jump back to answer the question also to the Covenant of Mayors. It's a very good example. So it started in Europe, and now it's, let's say, almost everywhere. We have the Covenant of Mayors for sub-Saharan countries, for Maghreb countries, and some additional ones also working on CCAP now to be endorsed also on long-term strategy at country level. So it's a very bottom-up process, and all these solutions feed the debate. And this is also true for the biodiversity debates, when we have also nature-based solutions, which are fully locally based solutions, and at the end, they have to be endorsed somewhere. But going back to the global agenda, we need to find a way, let's say, to feed the process by the mechanism to allow them to demonstrate the credibility of their proposal. What does it mean? Again, if cities, consumer networks, observer groups, or whatever networks have the good set of solutions, the good networks, but they are not in positions to demonstrate by large amount of projects, at the end, it will be very complex. I would just give one example about cities again. If you look to Africa, we all focus on large cities because so far they are the ones to have CCAP, or let's say the climate plan or strategy. It's called differently in Africa, but let's say CCAP. And so just to say that at the end, for example, if you look to Afri-Cities, the next large conference, which will deal also with resource, and also if you look to the World Water Forum, will start next week in Dakar, and Afri-City will be in Kenya, in Kusumu in May. If you look to these ones, so these guys will have a roundtable on Mayors. This will be the first official high-level dialogue in the forum, the Water Forum, with Mayors. It will be led by UCLG Africa, and also going back to Kusumu in Afri-City, they will concentrate on those intermediary cities. What does it mean? We need to find a process when all the stakeholders have a chance to access the solution. And this is why so far the puzzle is very, let's say, not fully equilibrated, because we are concentrating on the ones who are in position to demonstrate the feasibility, but many cities are not in the game so far because they have not access to the tools, not only the financial ones, the technical. So again, to say, if we want to feed the international process, we need to fix to the reporting of countries and to demonstrate our proposal will feed, let's say, their own, let's say, concern by the so-called, for example, NDC, long-term strategy, whatever. So this is complex, but I think the observer groups and all the coalition has a very strategic, let's say, momentum to play because they are the provider of solution. So they have to feed the process with solutions which can scale up the commitment of country, and at the end will force country to put in place the legal frameworks. I hope it is not too complex, but this is very bilateral, let's say, process, a bottom-up and a top-down process at the end. And this is really the way we need to build a dialogue with countries when they negotiate.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this answer. So maybe a question for Richard now again. How can we overcome the obstacle local political party opposition to more open participatory government?
Yeah, that's an important question as well, because even at a local level, politicians being politicians, they kind of enjoy being politicians and they don't really want to relinquish their position of perceived power. Such is the psychological problems of human beings in general, which is probably the reason why we're in this mess in the first place. What you have to do, and I mean, I've spent many years talking to, I've been a politician myself, but I've spent many years talking to politicians. What you have to do is you have to show them that it's in their favor as well, that in fact that they can benefit as a result of this. So for example, if you're a local politician, or indeed a politician at any level, and you're creating a policy, you would theoretically want to see that policy really bear fruit. And in order to do that, you need to have time. This is why I'm always talking about policy continuity, because otherwise as a society, we're taking one step forward, we're dedicating a lot of time and money to a specific policy, and then there's a change of government, and then because of political party rivalry or whatever, immediately we go back to beginning again, and there's a new project, but we never really make the step forward. How do you get over that? That's why you involve all of the members of the Quintuple Helix. That's why you create a social consensus. That is why you have policy co-creation. That is engagement. Engagement is not just giving a few seminars, as I said right at the beginning of my presentation today. Engagement is giving people who have become aware, who've become interested, give them a role. And one of the most important roles that a non-qualified, shall we say, non-professional participant can complete is to act as the public guarantor, the public overseer of that policy continuity. And I think that that is essential. And this is, we have put it to the test, and we have seen it work. In the Middle East, we're seeing it beginning to work now as a result of our local water forums. But for example, one of the first places where I put this to the test was in Los Angeles, together with the University of California, Irvine. And the question there was drugs. And there was a change of government at the time within that Los Angeles district. And they didn't like what was happening, but they couldn't actually renegade on it because they perceived that the public was in support of it and the society in general was in support of it. And so therefore they had to give it continuity. And that's a very, very important factor.
Thank you. So this brings us to the question for Esther. How do you compare conventional awareness campaigns with yours, with the one you presented, and how you deal with privacy issues?
Well, I think that is very soon to know it, but conventional awareness campaigns and this one are supplementary. Although we think that this campaign will have a high impact because students will be aware of their consumption by the digital platform. And the system is completely anonymized because the schools and the students will be a number. They won't use their names.
So, okay, thank you. And now a question for Rick. So what explains the success of the water footprint in reaching citizens and consumers?
Yeah, so that comes back to the main title of the webinar series today, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's actually quite simple, and that is that people understand the concept of a water footprint quite readily. And they easily understand that it takes a certain volume of water to produce the stuff they buy, they eat, they wear. And even though the metric itself carries the same or arguably even more scientific meaning than some other indicators like water productivity, those are more often tucked away in specialist models or in literature that's much harder to access for citizens. And even if we take a somewhat broader scope away from just the water footprint as an indicator, also from a management perspective, we see that the water footprint concept has some promising edges over other, well, maybe water management frameworks. Just take integrated water resources management as an example. It's widespread, of course, among experts, but let's be honest, it's quite dusty material, right? It's something only the experts care about. But if you ask people, do you want your water footprint, which you understand to be a volumetric measure for the things you buy and consume, do you want that water footprint to be fair and sustainable? Then that is an opening for a dialogue, really at the personal level with people, and they start to think about water much more easily. It's really an engaging frame. It's a different storyline, a different narrative that really brings in the consumer. On the other hand, we also have to, of course, take a bit of stance of humility here, and water just doesn't have that appeal that some other issues might have. Just think of child labor or even deforestation. And then within water, even against flooding, right? I mean, if there's a flooding event, for instance, people will also understand that that's a problem and something might need to be done about it. But water scarcity, drought even, that I like to call that misery in slow motion. It doesn't, you can't really take the momentum of the crisis because it's long processes that cause it in the first place. And I think that with those limits in mind, the footprint concept has been successful to put that on people's minds as it resonates.
Okay, great, thank you. I have a question for Stefan and also for Ciprian. What are his thoughts? So what, in your experience, are the main reasons why consumers are not always mobilized on water sustainability issues?
It's a very nice question. In fact, I think it is the same if we speak about energy, about food, about solidarity, about many, many things. I'm not so sure they have the full comprehension about the topic we are speaking on, especially in our countries, where many guys are fully disconnected about the origin of the difficulties for others. So I would say we need really to educate, but not only educate in a, let's say, technical approach, but also in a more, let's say, humanism approach, where we have a, let's say, a collective same lecture about the challenges. And again, the big assessments are something we can rely on because at the end, they demonstrate the transparency about the project and they avoid having some fake concern and fake information about, let's say, the consequences of bad consuming. Just one thing, for example, we speak about water, but we can speak about energy the same. And now we have this dynamics in Europe to put smart meter. And here it's quite interesting to understand that consumer at the end will have some flexibility because of the cost of the peak demand of other issues. So we can imagine at the end somewhere, we can also bridge in the future with having the price to be adapted to the way we are consuming water. And all this can educate consumer to feel concerned by, let's say, a humanist approach, but also by an economical approach. So, but this is, I think the guys are too much disconnected. They are not, let's say, fully concerned. And as soon as they can open the way they use the water at home, they are not concerned about the consumption. That's a poor situation, but we need to demonstrate and educate them.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Ciprian, what is your opinion on what are the main reasons why consumers are not always mobilized on water sustainability issues, maybe more in a local areas?
I think if I look it to me, in the last 15 years, I didn't reply to any of the Bucharest Water Utility Survey about if I'm satisfied or not. It is really a disconnection between citizens and all the utilities, for example, in Bucharest or in Romania, the citizens think they have other problems, the today problems to solve, and they think that water is coming from the tap, and they don't think further. They don't know how much is the effort of some people for all of us to have one bottle of clean water on the table. So simply we are disconnected about a lot of other things. For example, health is another thing that we don't know too much about, and we are disconnected. And now in the last 2 years, we are learning what it is about hygiene and taking care about the other. So like Stefan said, I think education and placing these people together in local water for local water groups, specialists and non-specialists, that might give to both groups the privilege to find things one from each other that they even didn't thought. You know, the specialists, they don't know that the professors, they have a kind of message to the citizens that the citizens, they don't understand. It's not a simple message. And the citizens, they don't know what the professors are doing or researchers are doing. So more communication and more social involvement for both parts, I think, would help. It's not easy. It will take time. But at least in Central and Eastern Europe, this is the situation.
Okay,
can I just add something there? I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. It's because I've had 2 coffees now, and so I'm in the mood now for talking. Is that I think that with regards to water specifically, energy, and as a result of the Covenant of Mayors, has become much more, shall we say, popular. And water, Rick said that, you know, water is really not politically, what I call politically, and it is true because it is thoroughly invisible. But I think that the principal reason why water has not had the same social effect as, for example, energy, or as, for example, public transport, the fact that the water companies themselves don't want them to be. There's been no effort on the part of the major decision makers of water to try and relate to, and I'm not talking about local utilities, so don't worry, Josh. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of what Southwest Water are doing. So I'm not criticizing them, but the large water interest, water companies, and the large water stakeholders, the last thing they want is the huge, great public debate about their tariffs or about the way that their industry works. So that's one of the first problems, and I think it's something that we need to recognize. And secondly, as well, I would say that researchers as well are absolutely atrocious at communicating. Very often, they're not interested in wanting to communicate. I mean, I honestly don't give a damn how many times a researcher publishes in some sort of academic journal, which is going to be read, if they're lucky, by 20 other researchers who are studying exactly the same thing. What I'm much more interested in is in researchers and water companies learning how to communicate, learning how to really interact with people. And people are not another species. We are all human beings, and it is very. And I would refer you back to that picture, which I showed you before. I mean, we used that picture together with the European Commission. We've used that picture and similar pictures in publications that we've created for the European Commission. And the effect that those pictures had were much, much more important than 100 published articles in academic journals. And so I do think that researchers who are socio-political actors as well, and who have to understand that, have a responsibility, obviously, yes, to exchange important technical information between themselves, but they also have to learn how to communicate that information and their knowledge and their problems in an accessible way to a much broader social community.
Okay, thank you. And this brings us to question for James and Joshua. I have a question. Do you think it's the smartphone app will help customers value water and have customers reduce their water use after using the app?
I'll answer this question. So with regards to that first point about whether we think that the smartphone app will help customers to value water, I hope so. I think the value of water through valuing water through better education will massively help customers in reducing their consumption. I think especially with the cost of living at the moment is going up in the UK, with the gas and electricity bills on the rise in April. And that's much talked about. And I think if customers have the option and the visibility to reduce their water bill through something as easy as an app, then I think they will. I think to touch on something that Richard said earlier, I think active interaction with customers is the best thing to do, because I think you give customers a role, like to quote Richard, and I think if the customers have that role and have that decision to reduce water, I think people will, because everybody benefits. Customers will save money on their water bill. The water companies will get better analytics based on their consumption and can better manage resources based on demand spikes, etc., and leakage, as well as the country as a whole, and the UK and nationwide. It helps us to preserve water, and people, I think, people do have in them the sort of a lot of people anyway have the sort of conscience to want to do what's best, but might not necessarily know how. And I think having a water app, which you can download on your phone and is very accessible and very personal to you and your local community, will help facilitate that. And the second part on that, as to have customers reduce their water use after the deployment of the app, we haven't got enough data yet. We're still in the deployment phase of the app, but we can use the Water Forum to closely monitor that. And I think that feedback will also help us to make any other later decisions on the water app, and any future changes and updates we need and bug fixes we need to change. I think having that close local community connection as almost like a focus group will help us to build something which is tailor-made by consumers for consumers. And I think everybody benefits from having that dynamic.
Thank you very much. And now I would take the last question for Rick. So Rick, are we crossing the planetary boundary for water use?
To open up a whole new can of worms in a final question. But I'll keep it short. Yes and no. At the global level, we are using less water collectively than there is sustainably available, meaning that if you would aggregate it to the global level, we are within the safe operating space. But what that actually means, I don't know, because again, you need to go back to the local levels to see how meaningful that is, and you have to localize the thresholds, especially the ecological thresholds. Here and there we have plenty studies, and one of the maps that I showed with a lot of red in it show that in many places we are already crossing those boundaries, and that is very worrisome, especially in those watersheds and basins that it concerns. So to the extent that the planetary boundaries can be downscaled to watersheds, yes, we are crossing them in many places, also in Europe, unfortunately. But that's a bit of downtone to end on, right?
Well, I'm sure that there are still, of course, many questions, but we can carry the discussions offline, and hopefully we will meet again and collaborate. So this is positive. So now I would kindly ask you to please turn on your cameras, everyone, please. All the participants, please. let's turn on the cameras. I would once again like very much to thank you to all the speakers. These were amazing presentations. We learned a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you, participants, also for your feedback. It means a lot to us. We will soon share the video on YouTube and the slides on NAIADES website. You are all invited to follow us and stay in touch with us via social media channels. So this was the 5th NAIADES webinar. Thank you again so much for your participation, and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Anna and Anja.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.